On episode 519 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson and discuss her book, Rezoom, The Powerful Reframe to End the Crash and Burn Cycle of Food Addiction. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/519. And a special note, we have changed the music for the podcast. Let me know what you think on our Facebook group at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group or via email, alan@40plusfitnesspodcast.com. If you decided you're ready to make a change, to reclaim your health and fitness, the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, and fitness nutrition, a FAI certified functional aging specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. I'm joined each week by our co-host, Rachel Everett. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey, all right? Let's go. When people ask me who I listen to keep up with what it takes to get and stay fit as we age, to learn new techniques, and keep motivated, on the top of my list is Dr. Jonathan Su, physical therapist, fitness expert, and the host of the Get Fit Guy podcast. It's part of the Quick and Dirty Tips Network, so in quick, smart episodes, Dr. Su uses step-by-step explanations and scientific evidence to help you move through the world with ease and enjoyment. He covers practical topics like how stretching can improve cardiovascular health, exercises to help with knee pain, and how to get the most out of walking for exercise. And he'll share tips on how to avoid neck, back, and shoulder pain, ways to relieve post-exercise soreness, and what to eat before, during, and after your workout. Whether you want to begin an exercise routine and don't know where to start, or you're looking to shake things up, Dr. Su's tips will help you reach your fitness goals and create a healthy, sustainable lifestyle. Listen to new episodes of the Get Fit Guy every Tuesday. Just search for Get Fit Guy wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, show of hands. Who is looking at 2022 as the year you finally lose the weight you've needed to lose for years? Great. Now, what are you doing different this time? Diets, new workout routines, resolutions, they just don't stick for most of us. So how are you going to feel in March if the same thing happens this year? Frustrated? Angry? Sad? I'd like to get you off that roller coaster and teach you how to win at weight loss. I've been coaching people online for over 6 years. You heard my credentials in the intro a couple of minutes ago. I'll help you lose weight and get fit so you can be the person you need to be for yourself and the people you love. Time is not on your side. If you're ready to win at weight loss, go to 40plusfitness.com/win. Winning at weight loss takes more than a diet, more than an exercise program. It requires you to learn how to be a winner, and I'm really excited to give you those tools. At 40plusfitness.com/win, you'll learn a bit about the 6-week program I'm launching soon, very soon. So don't wait. Go to 40plusfitness.com/win and win at weight loss. Raz, how you doing?
Good, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. It's been a hectic little week. Last week, I had 5 interviews. This week, I had Santa Claus duty. Dressing up as Santa Claus at Lula's, and so the kids came in. I think I've got another one on the agenda to do for the Rotary Club, and then both of our daughters got proposed to this week.
Is that right? Congratulations! How exciting!
Yeah, so 29. One of them just turned 29. The other's 28, and she'll turn 29 in July. So yeah, they were getting around that age where I guess you start saying, I'm old enough that I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm young enough that I can have kids. So, kind of they're right in there. I think the sweet spot of they should at this point know themselves pretty well. So they seem to like the guys they're with, and
good.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
Wow,
That'll
that's so
change.
exciting.
That'll change.
Oh, that's so exciting. What a wonderful time then for both of them. Very, very exciting. Congratulations to them both.
How are you doing?
Great. I'm doing good up here, enjoying the up and down weather up here in Michigan. Sunny days, a little bit of snow, a little bit of rain. You never know what you're going to get, but things are good. I just wrapped up a week of my marathon training plan, had a great week, good runs. It's really been a lot of fun.
Well, good, good.
Yeah.
This is also a time of the year where you kind of have to watch your health because the changing
Mhm.
weather and everything else kind of beats up your immune system. You're inside a bit
Yes.
more than you normally would be, so we're exposed to a little bit more of this and that. Obviously, when those, the main virus, corona, going around, but cold and flu
Mhm.
season and a whole bit. So
So
take care
true.
of yourself, eat well, get plenty of rest, and
Mhm.
follow the basic protocols. Wash your hands,
Sure.
avoid sick people,
Yes. Do the best you can.
do the
For
best you
sure.
can with what you got. All
That's
right,
right.
you ready to have a talk with Susan?
Sure.
Our guest today is the New York Times bestselling author of Bright Line Eating and the official Bright Line Eating cookbook. She is an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive sciences at the University of Rochester and an expert in the psychology of eating. She is president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and the founder and CEO of Bright Line Eating Solutions, a company dedicated to helping people achieve long-term sustainable weight loss. Today, we're discussing her book, Rezoom, The Powerful Reframe to End the Crash and Burn Cycle of Food Addiction. With no further ado, here's Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson. Susan, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, so good to be here with you.
So your new book, Rezoom, The Powerful Reframe to End the Crash and Burn Cycle of Food Addiction. And while I scored a 3 out of your range of how
Really? Just a
susceptible I
three,
am,
huh?
just a 3 with food. There's probably some
Yeah.
other things that I wouldn't score as well on. I think this is a really important concept because so many people think of food as just eat, eat better, eat less. And for a lot of people, their brain just doesn't work that way. And that's what I thought was really
That's
cool
right.
about your book is like, okay, no, let's actually call it what it is. And even though clinically, the association and all those folks, they don't want to call it that
Yet.
yet.
They're gonna have to
Good,
because it
good,
is, right?
Then
Yeah.
right. So, but the whole point is, if we don't treat it the way it needs to be treated, we don't get better.
That's right. That's right. You can't treat a condition that you don't know that you have or that you refuse to believe that you have. So food addiction is very real. And that's, one of the big thrusts of this book. It's actually the title of chapter 2, Food Addiction is Real.
Yeah.
And if we don't know that by now, it's sort of, hello, McFly, look around, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that I think food addiction these days is a really, it's an intuitive, obvious thing for people, right? Either they experience it or they see people they know who experience cravings, who experience repeated attempts to cut back with no lasting success, who experience unintended use, right? This like slippery slope where you intended to eat a little bit and then you find yourself eating more and more and more, who experience real consequences. I mean, 130,000 people in the United States this year had prior year, right, had their leg amputated because of the way they were eating. 130,000 people. Now, if that's not shocking enough, 55% of them will have their second leg amputated within 2 years because having one leg amputated wasn't enough of a cue to cut back on sugar with their type 2 diabetes, right? So if you don't think that that's sort of hazardous use, right, or using beyond the beyond, it is, right? Food is so addictive. So that's what this book is about. And it's about a different approach to managing the treatment or the recovery, or like, how do you lose weight and handle food addiction in a way that actually works and is actually sustainable. So that's what the book is about.
And this is not just some textbook. This is how you treat addiction. This is the way we've always treated addiction. You've lived and breathed addiction, not just with food, but other things in your life. And that's where you're coming from in this book. And I really appreciate the opening up the vulnerability that you had to have a book like this, where you're saying, no, I'm not some haughty-taughty PhD that's going to tell you how to beat addiction. I talk from experience of successes and failure.
Yeah, totally. And that's, I think, why food addiction was so obvious to me. I mean, I knew food addiction was real when I was 21 because I'd gotten clean from crack cocaine and crystal meth. I got clean finally at the age of 20. I spent my teenage years doing drugs and progressing to harder and harder and harder drugs, culminating in dropping out of high school, prostitution, and just repeated cycles of going out to prostitute and then going into the crack house to smoke crack. So that's living like that without a place to live, except the crack house is, that's a pretty serious case of addiction. And when I got clean, I never went back to drugs or alcohol after that moment. I just got clean. And yet within a year, my weight had started to pack on and I was eating in a way that looked, felt, and was just like my drug addiction. And food was harder to kick, Alan. That's the creepy thing. Food was harder to kick. I was not able to just kick food the way I had drugs. I mean, obviously you have to eat to live, but there were a lot of things that made food harder. And before I knew it, I was obese and really struggling with food, and my weight has been the story of my life. I mean, I could say in a way, I started using drugs at the age of 14 already to start to manage my food. I already had a weight problem. I already had a food problem. And that's why I turned to stimulants like crystal meth to manage my food and my weight problem. So it went all the way back for me. So yeah, I don't come to this. I do have an academic background. I have the PhD and all that, but that's not the high mountaintop from which I speak. I speak from the gutters of like, here I am eating a pint of ice cream with tears streaming down my face. Why am I doing this again? Kind of place. So I get it at a visceral level.
Yeah. And as I said, I went through and I looked at your susceptibility chart and took the quiz, and I said, okay, I scored a 3, which I get that for food. That makes sense for me because I'm the
just
guy
so people know, on a scale from 1 to 10,
1 to
10
10
is highly susceptible to food addiction. So it's a measure of how susceptible your brain is to food addiction. And Alan, you're just a 3, which means food isn't your thing.
Right.
It either means you're not susceptible to addiction at all, or it means you might be susceptible to other addictions, but food isn't your thing.
Right. And so, like I said, for me, it was okay. If I just say I'm not going to eat dessert, I don't eat dessert. And it's not like I leave that table after I said no to dessert and stop by the convenience store and buy some ice cream to eat at home in private because I really I needed that sugar. I wanted that sugar. I was addicted to that sugar. I just said no because that was the visual of me being at the dinner table and no one else wants dessert. Why is it so hard for us to beat food addiction?
Food is the hardest addiction to kick. And I say that both as a hope to die addict in every way, but also clinically speaking, food has some very unique things about it. First of all, it is socially pushed like no other drug. Not just accepted, but pushed and pushed and pushed, which means when you're trying to, let's say, abstain from sugar, right? Good luck getting through Thanksgiving or Valentine's Day or whatever without people actually pushing it on you. So that's one challenge. You have to eat to live, which you have to eat to live, but you don't have to eat donuts to live, right? So this is one of the things that Bright Line Eating does well, is it helps people figure out the line between what you're eating and not eating, right? When you're an alcoholic, when you're a crack addict, the line is really clear. Don't drink, right? Don't smoke crack. It's not ambiguous, generally speaking. I mean, with alcohol, it Benadryl or whatever, there are some slight, NyQuil, whatever. But generally speaking, the line is pretty clear. With food, it's a minefield. And I spent 8.5 years after I got clean from drugs trying to figure out where the first bite was. I couldn't tell what I was eating that was tripping me up, right? And finally, I came to sugar and flour. That's what it seems to be. Sugar and flour. It's essentially the processed foods. But if you just abstain from sugar and flour, that's a good demarcation point. But Alan, I could go on and probably I should. I just don't want to, soliloquize here for 10 minutes on you, but there are a couple other really fascinating reasons why food is harder than any other drug. It is the hardest. It's the hardest.
Please do. I want to get into this topic because I think if you don't recognize the problem, you'll never find the solution. And if you think just forcing yourself to try something, another diet, another thing, and you
Yeah.
don't get to the root cause of why this is so hard, then you're never going to solve the problem, particularly not solve it long term.
That's right. That's right. And here we are, early January, right? All these people have made resolutions. To lose weight is always the number one resolution. And we probably have people listening who've made that resolution before, right? So here's another reason why food is harder than anything else to kick. And it has to do with something that I think most people lump together with food addiction. But if you think about it, it's actually an entirely separate problem. And so to illustrate, I have an analogy that I like to give. I call it the acne analogy. Imagine a universe. This is just a little thought experiment. Imagine a universe in which drinking alcohol over time caused acne to develop all over your skin. And not just acne, but really, really bad disfiguring acne. And not just really bad disfiguring acne, but fatal acne. Acne that research suddenly showed would kill you 10, 15, maybe even 20 years before your time. So you learn this, you know this. And like people will, because alcohol is fun to party with, right? And relax with, you start to drink. So you start to drink. And at first, it's not a problem. You start to develop a little bit of acne, but it's not that bad. And over time, you drink more, you develop alcoholism, and the acne comes on hard and fast. So years go on, your body's now covered with really bad acne, and you know it's going to kill you before your time. You try quitting drinking over and over and over again. You finally succeed. You get sober. But the acne persists. You still have it. And now your job is to figure out what to do with this acne, because it's terribly unsightly. You don't want to live with it, and it's going to kill you, 5, 10, 20 years before your time. So you go to search for a solution to the acne, and you find one. There actually is only one solution to the acne. And you start to adopt this solution, but the problem is it's got a side effect. And the side effect is powerfully driving urges to drink alcohol. And so in your life, you get stuck in this loop of drinking alcohol, quitting drinking alcohol, trying to solve the acne problem, being driven back to drink alcohol. This is the relationship of food addiction and excess weight. The problem with excess weight is the brain fights prolonged weight loss by driving you to eat, even if you're still maintaining 100 or 200 extra pounds on your body. If you've lost weight over any significant period of time, your brain makes hormonal adjustments to force you to regain weight, and it drives you back to your food addiction. So this is the maddening loop that people get stuck in. And that is, in my opinion, the biggest reason that food is the hardest addiction to kick.
Yeah, the hormones are really a big part of this, because if you're constantly hungry, then you're going to struggle to stay away from food, and then staying away from food makes you constantly hungry. It's a pretty bad cycle. Yeah. Now, one of the things I really liked about your book was you didn't just jump into a diet or a program and say this is what you eat. These are your, because you did talk about lines, but we're going to get to that. But the first thing we have to get into when we're going to talk about this is that self-work, that self-awareness, the deep and not just this casual self-awareness of,
right,
I have a sugar addiction. It's a much, much deeper awareness of that at points in time. And I don't mean from a schizophrenia perspective, but we're different people in the fact that at some point in time, the voice in our head is telling us, oh, go ahead and have that donut.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another voice in our head. It's the controller. It says, no, you shouldn't have that. And they might be going back and forth. And when they are, we find ourselves now obsessed with thoughts of food, because we've told ourselves no, and we've also told ourselves yes. Can we talk a little bit about this parts work and how there's different voices, and then kind of go into a couple of examples like the one I just started about how that works dynamically within our brain?
Yes, totally. Well, just to say, first of all, this perspective on human beings is spreading rapidly because it's so effective. It's called internal family systems, or IFS, and more easily called parts work, like you just referred to it as. And what's so helpful about it is that it allows us to create change really rapidly by relating to these different sort of selves that we all seem to embody. And I'm not talking about, dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. I'm talking about every healthy psyche has multiple parts to it. And this notion goes way back. There's Egyptian hieroglyphs that have a parts dialogue on ancient tombs. Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato all talked about parts. Socrates said it best. And actually, it pertains to the food idea, like that you just mentioned. Socrates said, "One mind cannot both want and not want at the same time. Therefore, we are all at least two." And so, just bringing up this idea that there's different parts of us. So, in Bright Line Eating, we invoke this parts notion to help people heal at really, really deep levels. Anyone really who wants to be healthy, I would wager, even a 3 on the susceptibility scale of food addiction like you, Alan, will have developed some version of these parts, the food indulger part and the food controller part. The food indulger says some version of, hey, why not? It's a special occasion. It's an important day, or I deserve it, or I feel like eating, or whatever, and gives us license to indulge a bit, right? Whatever that means to us.
It's the devil. It's the devil on this shoulder, and the angel on this shoulder, and they're like, go ahead, come on, have a no. You said you were going to do this.
And the angel is the food controller that's trying to manage it, right? The food manager. And we have different versions of it. Some people just have a healthy version that's like, you don't want to do that because you'll feel a little yucky tomorrow morning, and you're getting up early for a run, and some people have a really perfectionistic and wickedly critical food controller that's, really mean, or really sets up a high standard that's almost impossible to live to, right? Super perfectionistic. But anyway, most of us have some version of that angel on the shoulder that's saying, no, no, no. And what we get into in the book Rezoom is we also introduce people to their authentic self, their highest self. I don't mean self like ego self. I mean self as in grounded, centered self. You're there when you're calm, clear, connected, curious, compassionate, right? Like in that kind of place, you can make decisions for yourself that are really empowered and not really driven by either of those voices. I think that's a really interesting awareness from this perspective, is you're not actually trying to create a world where you're always siding with the angel, with the food controller. You're trying to settle into a truer version of yourself that is actually a step back from the control, right? Anyway, it's something we get into in the book a lot, is what's the inner work you have to do in order to sort of transcend the polarization between the food indulger and the food controller. Because for people who are high on the food addiction susceptibility scale, it has become a full-on war.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. If you do this self-awareness work and you really think about it, and it blends into your Rezoom process of, okay, why did this happen? What were the voices? Who was I talking to when I did this? And why did I react the way? Then it's like, oh, well, I was just being a food rebel because I've been so strict on myself for so long and drill sergeant-y, if you will, that, okay, I just kind of popped a gasket and said, damn it, I'm having a piece of pizza. Didn't kill me, didn't really throw me over the edge, but just enough that I said, okay, maybe I just need to be kinder to myself instead of being so mean and rigid and thinking of myself as bad just for thinking about the pizza. Because it's creating that dynamic in yourself where, either the rebel comes out, and you have all these different characters,
sort of archetypes.
That you go through and say, who was I when I made this decision? Who was I when this happened? And that every one of them, and I think this is really important that you said in the book, every one of them is actually looking out for your best interests. They're just doing it from their own paradigm.
Right. Right, totally. And Alan, this is the thing. So I'm on the food addiction susceptibility scale. I'm a 10. I'm a 10. And that's not surprising, maybe hearing my addiction background. But here's the thing, Alan, is for people like me who are much higher on that scale, we're talking 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Once you get into certain territory on that scale, it might actually be true that the best path to peace, to food neutrality, where food thoughts aren't, dominating your day, to physical health and weight loss, right? The best path to that might actually be a path that involves some form of abstinence, right? I abstain from sugar and flour because when I include them in my diet at all, it's the sort of classic example of addiction. It's the same reason I don't try to smoke one cigarette. I tried that experiment again about 4 years ago, and thus started about 2 years of trying to quit cigarettes, quitting, restarting again. I don't need to run the one cigarette experiment. It goes badly for me, right? And I just got to say, the one cookie experiment goes just as badly. So I don't run that experiment anymore. But the key is that I'm not doing it from a punishing food controller place. And so the genesis of this book was really, how do we present a reframe on food recovery for people who've gotten trapped in a yo-yo dieting cycle or in a food addiction recovery cycle? Because there's a lot of 12-step programs that talk about abstinence from certain foods as well. And people often get trapped in a relapse cycle. And I had gotten trapped in that cycle again myself after many, many years of peace and being in my bright body, which is like what I call sort of a right-sized body without carrying around all sorts of excess fat and stuff like that. I'd been there for a long time. And then I got trapped again in a relapse cycle. And coming out of that, I've been out of that for a few years now. Coming out of that, I got the awarenesses that I put into this book. It's a reframe on the perfectionistic tendencies that can naturally go along with an abstinence framework. But the kicker is, for some people, the abstinence is still necessary, right? It still doesn't mean that trying to eat the one piece of pizza for some people is going to be the right thing to do. Because if you've run that experiment enough times, you know that for you, it might not work. So this book is for people who are in that category and who need a reframe to get out of the crash and burn cycle, because it's very painful.
Yeah, because the quicker you get back on the road, the less damage you've done. And I'm not going to say the easier, but it just makes it, you feel more in control because you didn't completely crash. You're sort of easing yourself back into traffic and moving forward.
Totally. And this book helps people who have brains more like mine to actually avoid the crash before it happens. Coming from a place of more healing, more self-compassion. It's really the shame and the self-flagellation on the way to picking up the excess food, right? That accelerates the tragedy of it. And so this book is sort of the prescription of getting off of that horrible cycle altogether.
Now, one of the things you do in the book, which I think is really important, I'm a big fan of commitment. I would not have been successful in changing my health and fitness if it didn't start with a commitment to myself. Yeah. But you've done something I think that's pretty special, is you're looking at it from making a daily commitment. So when you wake up, because you do have that structure, you do have that abstinence mindset, you have these bright lines. And so you have right now 4, probably you have more because there are others and we'll talk about those, but there's at least 4 base bright lines. And we're not talking about a line in the sand, because a line in the sand you can easily miss over and not see. You're talking about bright lines for a daily commitment. You actually write out exactly what you're going to eat the next day, each day. And then you're able to report back to yourself on your commitment. Did I follow through with exactly what I told myself I should do today? Can you talk a little bit about Bright Lines eating and what the 4 core ones are, and then go into some of the others, because I think those can be equally as important.
Yeah. So in Bright Line eating, there are 4 essential bright lines with the food. And 2 of them have to do with the substance addiction, right? No sugar, no flour. That's keeping the alcohol, the nicotine, the crack cocaine out of our system, right? No sugar, no flour. The other 2 handle the process addiction, the behavioral addiction to just eating. And they are meals. So eating just meals, no grazing, no snacking. And typically we start people off 3 meals a day. There are some exceptions, like people who've had bariatric surgery recently can't eat that much food at 1 meal and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, it's 3 meals a day. And then quantities. So we actually bound our food with a digital food scale. And I weigh my food. And it's so funny because I just had a visitor who was a 1 on the susceptibility scale, literally a 1. And he was visiting my house, and we ate all our meals together for a few days. And he just kept talking about how he's like, okay, you told me you weighed your food, but you eat more than I do at every meal. And this is like a full grown man, right? So we're weighing our food not to make for tiny quantities, but actually to make sure that we eat enough of a lot of foods, because people who have a history of dieting typically will not eat enough at each meal unless you make them actually account for it. So those are the 4 bright lines. A bright line is a legal term originally. It just means a clear, unambiguous boundary that you just don't cross, right? So this is like the bright line that the alcoholic puts up for alcohol, right? I'm just not going to drink no matter what. And then the other things I would count more as habits or behaviors or tools or whatever, like writing down your food the night before. That is a practice that people start when they start doing bright line eating. And yes, committing it, right? In some kind of way. I often recommend people even commit it to someone else, which can be very powerful. Like, this is what I'm eating, and then circle around the next 24 hours and say, yes, I ate only in exactly that. And here's what I'm eating tomorrow. Yeah. It's very powerful.
Well, that's why we have a ceremony when we get married, and we wear a ring when we get married. It's, that's the public commitment. And you're like, okay, here I am. I'm committed to this relationship. And that's deeper meaning than you just saying to yourself before you go to bed, this is all I'm going to eat tomorrow, and no one else on earth knows. So it does hold you a little bit more accountable to what you're doing, which, again, if you need that support, is really important. Now, Doctor, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Oh my gosh. Say it again. You define wellness as being the healthiest,
fittest, and happiest you can be.
Happiest, healthiest, fittest, happiest.
In my mind, you have to have all 3.
All right. Healthiest, fittest, happiest. So I'll just share from my expertise, right? I mean, because I'm sure people come on here and can say all kinds of things. Anyone can sort of spout off on that. But from my vantage point, one of the big ones is going to be look at and honestly face the amount of food addiction that you actually have on board with the brain you've got right now. Like, assess it. Like, Alan, you took the quiz, right? People should take the quiz. Find out what kind of brain they've got, because if you're a 1, 2, or 3, it's a whole different ballgame, right? You don't need to worry about a little bit of sugar. You can have that, recover really quickly, and absolutely research shows that, being 90 to 95% true to a food plan is enough, right? When you're higher on the scale, that little bit of sugar turns into more and more. And also creates a lot of psychological chatter where you're thinking about what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your plan or off your plan, how many miles, how many calories, how many pounds to burn off that thing that you just ate. And that's a state of mind that is not well. That's not healthy, right? That's not happy. It may or may not be fit, but it's definitely not healthy and it's not happy. So there's one right there. Like, take a look. And if people want to take the quiz, they can go to foodaddictionquiz.com. Foodaddictionquiz.com. So acknowledge however much food addiction you have on board, because it really does change the landscape of the type of food approach that will work for you. If you're trying to be well, you're trying to be fit, and you're trying to be healthy, everyone who's trying to be fit knows that you can't out exercise a bad diet, right? And if the diet piece is the piece that keeps slipping in your wellness regimen, take a look at that. And Alan, I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about it, but I just want to say, because this is a podcast for people over a certain age, right? Is that sort of your theme?
Over 40, yes.
All right. Well, maybe let me just mention it now, if I may. When you're over 40, and especially over 50, your diet impacts your body differently. And this is true whether you're male or female. And the reason is lowering estrogen. And as your estrogen becomes more probabilistic and lower, this is true for men too. Don't be fooled. It's not just men have testosterone, women have estrogen. Men and women have both. And as your estrogen goes down, you stop getting the synergistic and protective effects it has on your insulin response. And that means that your body now responds very differently to the junk food that you might be eating. You don't get away with it anymore. And that is the source of the weight creep in the middle that people experience past a certain age. Now, we did a research study that we published in a peer-reviewed scientific outlet that showed that doing bright line eating, which means eliminating sugar and flour, on our program in the first 2 months, people at every age category lost an equivalent amount of weight, which means that this type of approach to eating turned a 60-year-old woman's body into a 30 or 20-year-old woman's body, which is shocking. But just saying, the older you get, the more you need to acknowledge the amount that the degree to which addiction to certain processed foods might be playing, right? So there's that. The second thing I would say is really note your meal timing in relation to your circadian rhythm. So here's something that I used to experience. I'm a night owl by constitution, like wickedly so. Like left to my own devices, I'm up till 3, 4, 5 in the morning and I'm sleeping past noon every day. Since I started eating this way, which I did 18 years ago, I've been eating this way now since I was 28 years old. I'm 47 now. It's 18 years that I've been eating this way. I now go to bed and I'm like eyes drooping, full melatonin at 9 p.m. So like last night I went to sleep at 8:39 p.m. and I was up easily at 5. But I'm not that way constitutionally. The difference is I started changing my meal time. Since I started eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it turns out that the timing of your meal has as big or a bigger impact on your circadian rhythm as light exposure. So don't be fooled. Any calories you're putting into your system after dinner, they're mucking up your circadian rhythm. So really consider returning to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or at least watching your meal timing as it relates to your circadian rhythm. That also had a huge impact on my mood. By giving up sugar and flour and changing my meal times the way I used to have clinical depression really, really badly, and I don't have it anymore. And then the third thing I think is make sure that you feel deeply supported and connected in life. I used to teach, so I'm still a professor at the University of Rochester, but I don't teach as much anymore because I do so much research and with this bright line eating thing. But I used to teach positive psychology at the college level. And a few years ago, researchers discovered that human connection is more potent for well-being than the combination of diet and exercise put together. That's how important it is to not feel lonely. It's so important to be well supported and connected. And if you think you're an introvert, just saying in the book Rezoom, we've got a category or a part called the isolator, right? Which is different than healthy alone time. Introverts and all people really need a healthy amount of alone time. Isolation is a different thing. Isolation is keeping yourself from support that would actually be helpful. And research shows that introverts and extroverts alike experience the same degree of uplift when they add something to their schedule, like lunch with a good friend once a week, right? So introverts just need fewer people and fewer superficial connections, but a few deep ones are absolutely necessary. So however you roll, just make sure that you would answer, oh, heck yeah, to a question like, right now in your life, are you feeling deeply supported and connected? Those are my 3.
Thank you, Doctor. If someone wanted to learn more about you or learn more about the book, Rezoom, or your program, Bright Lines Eating, where would you like for me to send them?
I would say probably the first step would be to take that quiz. Go to foodaddictionquiz.com, but also Bright Line Eating. So it's BRIGHTLINE eating, EATING, brightlineeating.com. And you can get started with Bright Line Eating for just $20 a month. So if you just want to give it a try and see, you were mentioning hunger earlier. We publish findings in the Journal of Nutrition and Weight Loss, 2 years out, people haven't regained any of their weight. It's shocking, the results that we're getting around here. But also, within the first 2 months, people's hunger and food cravings have gone away completely on our program. On average, literally hunger and craving levels down to below 1.5 out of 5, like little to no hunger or cravings anymore ever. So yeah, brightlineeating.com. People can give it a try for just $20 a month. It's probably the best deal in weight loss.
You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/519, and I'll be sure to have the links there. So Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome back, Raz.
Hey, Alan, what a really fascinating interview you had with Susan. You know, I'm really excited to get the chance to talk about food addiction because it's something a little bit different than your standard dieting type situation.
Yeah, I've had people on. We've talked about how food can be used as kind of this emotional bridge, if you will, a best friend, something that takes the pain away. And I've never felt that compulsion with food as using food to do that. Adrenaline, absolutely. I'll do something crazy like, jump off a building or something like that. But
no, thank you.
There's a select certain number of people that are susceptible to food actually becoming a problem if they're using it for the wrong reasons. And, you and I were talking before we got on here that you took the quiz that I took, and I encourage people to get out there and try it. I was a 3, you were a 2, and it's this self-awareness thing. What is your relationship with food? And you really have to break that down to a core component of, what does food mean to me? Now, I know you and I, we think it's fuel. You're going to go for a run. It's fuel. and it's
That's
fuel.
right.
And there's foods I just love that I know I'll eat more of than I should or that I need. Especially when I can't get them all the time. And then they're available. I kind of go a little bit overboard on it, but it's not that kind of food. It's I pretty much moved away from the sugars and that. But I never really was, I would say I might've been addicted to bread. But only reason I say that is when I went paleo the first time, I would have dreams about bread.
Wow, that's interesting.
Like smelling it, like in my sleep, like someone was cooking bread, and I could smell it in the oven, and just dreaming about bread. And I thought, this is so weird. I quit bread a week ago, and I'm dreaming about bread. So maybe there was a little something there with bread. I don't know, but you talk a little bit about from your experience, because again, you're 2, so. That's not how you look at food.
No, like you said, I definitely look at food as fuel. And I'm aware of the addictive nature of my personality, I say potential addictive nature. When I was a kid, my grandmother, who I love and adore and respect, and was crushed when she died from breast cancer, she was a smoker. And whenever we went to her house, her curtains and her couches and the blankets on her couch, everything reeked of cigarette smoke. When we drove in a car, she would smoke in the car. And even in the dead of winter, it could be 20 below. I just needed that little bit of window down so I could get some fresh air to get some relief. That smell was just so overpowering and influential to me that I knew I would never want to smoke ever in all of my life. And to this day, I've never even tried cigarettes or any other thing that you might smoke. I've never done it because I was so repulsed by that. But people who smoke, it's an addiction. It's like Susan mentioned, she had a more serious drug addiction than cigarettes, but there is an addictive part to that whole thing. And I can see how food can become similar, whether you're physically in need of having that sugar rush, because, carbs and sugar can be very addicting, or is it more her personality? Like Susan mentioned, she had a drug addiction. She replaced that compulsion with food. So there's something to that personality component as well. But being aware of that, having that self-awareness, like you mentioned, food never crossed my radar as being something that I was compelled to have. I don't hide food in my pantry and eat it, later in the closet. Although the one thing I will admit to is coffee. If anybody knows me, I am a definite coffee addict. I have it every day. But even with that, I know that I don't have to have it to live. If I woke up tomorrow and was camping, like when I go to Isle Royale next year, and I can't have my Keurig coffee pot with me, I know I could go a couple of days without having it. I'll know I'll have some consequences, but it's a different type of addiction than I think sugar or flour is, like Susan had mentioned.
Yeah, and we've had guests on. Rosie was on, and the woman Cheryl. Was it Sharon? So I've had a couple guests on that really had emotional, deep issues with food. And the way they thought about their body, the way they thought about their food. And it was that relationship with food that was the problem. And so, as you go through self-awareness of your journey in health and fitness, it's critical for you to have that conversation with yourself and say, what kind of relationship do I have with food? And, why would I feel compelled if I went to the grocery store to go down the cookie aisle when I know that the cookie aisle is just not going to serve me in what I need for what I'm trying to do. And so as you look at that, if you feel compelled or take the test, it'll probably give you some information there. But most of us, if we take a moment and we're honest, we can say, I am a moderation person or I'm an all or none person. And I can tell you, I am an all or none person. Even though I scored very low on that test, it was really because it was just related to food. And I can say no to any food. And I can have a little of something and then not have any more. But, there are other things that, I'm all or none. And when it's all, I mean all. Until it's all gone, that kind of thing. And maybe I used to be with that. Like I talked about Girl Scout cookies, and I'd buy the Thin Mints, and the box would be gone the first day.
Yep.
Even if I was trying to be good, I'd go to the grocery and go to the freezer because we'd put them in the freezer, and I would take a serving, which I think was like 3 cookies, and I'd eat a serving, and then I'd go sit down, I'd eat the 3 cookies, I'd get back up, I'd walk there, I'd get another 3 cookies and go sit down. And then eventually I'm just standing in the freezer eating the rest of the cookies.
Wrap them up. Yep. Finish it off. Can't eat any if they're not there.
Yeah. And so I had to come up with some strategies that worked for Girl Scout cookies until it was just a point where I no longer thought of Girl Scout cookies as something that I needed. I actually would give the Girl Scouts money and not take the cookies.
Sure. That's wonderful.
I just say, okay, you're trying to raise money. I get it. But back then, okay, again, to kind of date this, is a box of cookies was like $2.50. Someone was telling me the other day they're like $5. But I don't know, because I don't stop by the booth anymore if I came out of a grocery store in the United States in February, which I haven't done in 3 years. But you walk by, they're there, and want some cookies, and here's $2.50. No, just buy yourself a box or give a box away or, whatever. And then I just move on. So I just say, this is a very important concept, and that self-awareness is critical. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to fail because this stuff is everywhere.
It is.
The flour and the sugar is in every single thing out there. It's just almost impossible to avoid. And there are going to be times when you go in and you're like, okay, I want something to eat. And it's, what's this? And how's it prepared? It's breaded. It's like, okay, can you make it not breaded? And sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But then even then there's sugar in the sauce, or there's this and that. And so just, it's really, really hard to avoid these foods. And if they trigger you,
Mm-hmm.
like Susan said, she tried to smoke a cigarette, just one, and then boom, she was right back to smoking. And it was just really, she knows she
Mm-hmm.
can't even have a little bit, or she's
Right.
going to go off. And if that's you, then you have to be honest with yourself. And yeah, cold turkey, you're out.
Mm-hmm.
There is no moderation. There is no trying
Right.
it. There is no detour with this stuff. It's all or none. And you have to get that into your head if you care about your health and fitness. But
Yep.
again, it comes.
Susan mentioned the word abstinence, and I just want to keep that word in bold print, right front and center, because for some people, abstinence is absolutely necessary. And for her, with her type of an addiction, personality or physical addiction to food, she cannot allow herself a bite of sugar or a bite of flour, because that could send her back down the spiral to where she was, overweight and unhappy. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that need to come to terms with that word abstinence. For people like you or me, moderation, we can live with that. We can have a couple Girl Scout cookies and then wait until next season when Girl Scout cookies are sold again. But for people who have more of an addictive personality or that physical need for food, chips are in the grocery store every day. Cookies are in the grocery store every day. And sometimes abstinence would be the main tool to break that habit. I just want to keep that front and center.
And there's a reason, in these grocery stores, in these convenience stores, that things are where they are. If you want to walk down to the milk aisle, you're probably going to have to walk through an aisle that's going to have sugar-laden foods or chips or something. And you're going to turn around when you stop to buy something like bottled water, and there's the chips. And it's literally set up that way. You get up to the counter, and there's on both sides candy lining both rows. But it's done on purpose. They study that stuff. They literally study the traffic flow and to optimize their sales. They're putting that stuff in your way, so you see it and
impulse,
and then you buy it. Yeah. So you have to know yourself. You have to go back to your commitment. And if you do that, then yes, abstinence. And it's that point of saying, abstinence is the only way. And then you have that relationship with yourself, and you have to say, okay, I'm not going to cheat. And you wouldn't cheat on your relationship. You wouldn't say, oh, that person looks really fine, I'm going to go do that. No, you don't. But you have to have the same self-love. You have to have the same self-awareness and not put yourself in those situations if you don't need to be. And
That's
most of us, if we're trying to lose weight, trying to get more fit, we don't need that stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. You said the other word that I would like to highlight and bold, and that's commitment. And whether you're committed to moderation or committed to abstinence or whatever it is, just be committed to yourself for sure and make the best choices for you.
All right, Rach. I'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Emily Willingham and discuss her book, The Tailored Brain. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.